Hey, what is going on, everybody? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today we are looking at Spawn issue 32, dated June 1995. Why are we looking at this issue? One reason only: the art of Greg Capullo. All right. So the reason I picked this issue here is this issue actually made me come back to Spawn after I'd left for a few months. In and around issues 17, 18, somewhere 16, I think even. Tom McFarlane got Greg Capullo on board to draw some issues, and originally those first few issues that he did, I was not on board at all with Greg Capullo. To me, he still had that kind of X-Men style that I don't think fit Spawn at all. He was also being inked by one of those kind of, flashier, maybe Extreme Studios, Wildstorm Studios type inkers. So I really didn't like it. And then he came back for a few issues. 2021, there was a whole confusion there in and around the Batman Spawn crossover in the numbering system for Spawn. So 2 issues with Houdini at some point. Are those the ones I'm talking about? Maybe. And I was like, what is going on with Spawn? And that was really just, those issues were horrible. You go back, the art, the composition and stuff is fine, but again, the finish on top of Greg Capullo is just, again, not what I was expecting from a Spawn comic. The McFarlane kind of, textury look was gone. And what I think happens with issue 32, and not, well, I mean, it's a slow evolution, but basically in and around, I believe Spawn 25 is when Mark Silvestri does that issue. I got that issue, I remember, back in the day, and then I dropped off Spawn after that because Greg Capullo, I believe, was continuing on as the regular artist, and I was not interested in that. So 26, 27 and up, didn't really look at it. And at some point, months later, I hit upon a copy of issue 32 and found myself, surprised that I was really enjoying the artwork. So what seems to have happened is the main difference is that McFarlane starts to ink Greg Capullo, and Greg Capullo starts to turn a little bit more into and lean into the horror kind of aspect of Spawn, which is great, and really helps his art. And then, of course, to have McFarlane inking on top helps to keep that kind of textural consistency, that that noodly kind of style that McFarlane always talks about, his noodly lines that we really enjoyed, right? Capullo has talked about this a lot, and I read in interviews where he says, McFarlane really kind of, if you're not careful, he kind of takes over a lot, right? So, they had to strike a balance there. And I do find personally that in and around this issue 32 is where that balance is struck. And that's why we're looking at Spawn 32. Let's have a look inside. All right, so Image Comics presents appearances, story, Tom McFarlane, art, Greg Capullo, Tom McFarlane. So at this point, it wasn't really defined. So we were still wondering if, McFarlane was drawing, inking, Capullo was drawing some, inking some. Was it mixed? Were some pages more one guy drawing or the other? I think what really it turned out to be is that Greg Capullo was doing kind of not super tight pencils, but fairly tight, and super tight breakdowns, but not super tight pencils, I feel like. And McFarlane was kind of doing the finish and the inking and stuff to give it that Spawn look, right? So copy editor and letters, Tom Orzechowski, and of course, as always, at least for the beginning kind of part of Spawn's life as a comic, color by Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. It says here, special thanks to Kevin Conrad and Julia Simmons. In Kevin Conrad's case, did he help out maybe with some art, some inking? Possibly. What else did I want to mention about here? I think I covered it all. Let's hit the pages. So if I remember correctly, I'm not going to go too much through the story here. I'm mostly going to focus on the art. But if I remember quite right, the story is the Redeemer and Spawn have been in battle, and Spawn now has somehow, almost like in anime with like Dragon Ball, when they evolve and become stronger, he's evolved into a newer form of Spawn, and his costume has grown and added some new elements to it. So this was touted as a costume change for Spawn. And when you see it, I mean, it's cool, and I do honestly kind of like the new elements. They are pretty cool. They do make Spawn a little bit cooler, maybe graphically and visually, but they're not as drastic as you would think. It's still fairly recognizable as the Spawn look, for sure. If you really want to get down to it, a boot was changed and a glove was changed. I feel like that's mostly what the changes were. There was supposed to be apparently some sort of change to his appearance, to his face, under the mask, but I just think that's the evolving art style that they kind of worked into the narrative. I don't think that was a conscious thing, because when you get some of the changes to Spawn's face, and this has happened a few times, I think through the series, it's a trope that comes back. The change is never that drastic. His face has always kind of looked like cooked hamburger, and then it just looks more like cooked hamburger or less like cooked hamburger. Sometimes he has a mouth and lips. Sometimes he's just got teeth like a skull. Those are kind of the level of cosmetic changes that are being made. Love this shot here. The perspective, super awesome. Really well done. Just enough information. Lots of cool McFarlane detailed buildings, but definitely laid out by Capullo. Love that they just have the balls to throw that big dark shape there. That's the tallest skyscraper in the city that Spawn's climbing here. So the implication being that this is a building in the Spawn mythos that's owned by, or is heaven's, and that he's climbing to heaven. So here we get glimpses of the new look, right? More spikes, more teeth, almost look like teeth, right? And the more extreme Spawn, which again is still fairly familiar in the basic tropes of his design. So this is one of the angels. If you know a little bit about Spawn mythology, right? There's good and evil, heaven and hell. She's one of the angels who kind of monitors, or it's almost heaven's like a corporation, and she is the CEO of Earth, I believe, or something along those lines, right? And so the dignitaries have arrived, is what she's told, and in come all these ladies, because all the angels are ladies. And in comes this very old lady, and what's going to be kind of hinted at is that basically in the Spawn universe, this is God. Now, this is God taking the form of an old lady, not literally God himself or herself or itself. But in this case, he's taken the form of a kindly looking old grandma. So they're discussing, what heaven and hell affairs they need to discuss. And boom, you got the double page spread here with Spawn crashing their party, right? And here I think you get, the best of both worlds when we're talking about the art with Greg Capullo and Tom McFarlane. You get the new little details and stuff in the McFarlane way of, doing textures for sure on the chains here, added here with the double lighting on the gloves and stuff. But what you get is the sound, anatomy, and composition of Greg Capullo underneath, right? Nothing wrong with McFarlane, but he did tend to bend and break things in weird parts, and the anatomy wasn't always sound, as we say. Still worked, but you know what I mean? Capullo has a way of exaggerating things where it still feels, anatomically correct, even if maybe some of it isn't, but it's just very sound in his anatomy, his composition. I've drawn pages with broken glass, not fun, takes a long time, but you get, you're usually pretty happy with the result if you stick in there. Always good to overlap your character with some glass here, right? Overlap glass with glass to give that impression, right? Again, the level of detail and stuff, that McFarlane level of detail and nudely lined and texture, and the way the cape is now, it's it's healing itself, so it's full of holes and strands and stuff, so that just adds to the chaos and the use of the cape to create those different planes and create that depth in the image. But once again, that position, right, the anatomy, super sound, cartoony for this god character, but again, anatomically sound. The posture and everything, clearly an old lady, in its intent. So some angels, battle angels, come in, right, to confront Spawn, and of course Spawn grabs the old lady here, not knowing that it's God. For some reason though, the costume, I think it's mentioned here, the costume's going limp, right, all of a sudden. So feels like maybe God, just being in the presence of God, the costume just can't attack God. At least that's what's kind of implied. Love this shot here. This is the Capullo, right? The anatomy, the jaw muscle, like all of the stuff. This angle, usually, I know Spawn doesn't have ears, visible ears or hair and stuff, but that's still a pretty hard angle to pull off and make look right, and also look very cool, right? Just the way he highlights the neck muscles is simple but like super effective. The hand, I don't know about, you know, all of that color treatment there, but I mean, it looks, there's something otherworldly and makes it look cool. You know, this is definitely a period of color excess when it comes to computer coloring, but I do think Steve Oliff, Oli Optics, were some, you know, definitely one of the better coloring studios. So you get a bit of B story with this was also a trope of Spawn. Every few issues you get a page or two of Terry and Wanda, Spawn's wife when he was still alive as Al Simmons. We get a bit of C story with Jason Wynn in around this time. This lasted a while too. Jason Wynn, who's Spawn's boss when he was Al Simmons, he's the one who ordered his death, right? So eventually there's a confrontation building towards that between Spawn and his boss. So here we are back to Spawn threatening God. And I don't quite remember what's going on here. If he's not, is he serving as the host or something for the Redeemer? Yes, that's what's happening, right? Or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. Again, I'm mostly going through this issue for the artwork and not for the storyline. Redeemer, here's a good example, I think, of when we talk about Greg Capullo's anatomy. Greg Capullo, I don't know if you guys know, is a bodybuilder, has been for most of his life. So, you know, when it comes down to the muscles and from this position especially, like his anatomy is very accurate. Definitely much better than McFarlane's. And again, you get the best of both worlds here. You get the proper compositional anatomy by Greg Capullo, you know, and then that sweet McFarlane noodly detail on top. And something like this too. I don't know if McFarlane ever did anything like this. It's kind of cartoony and exaggerated, but I like it. And you know, it's a bold use of perspective on the hand here, giving us a foreground element, like the characters come towards us rather. I think that looks great. All right. Of course, we got a battle between Redeemer and Spawn. Some of these layouts are a little bit confusing. Maybe just a little bit too much. Not that Greg Capullo's not a pro or that he's a slouch or anything. Maybe in some instances the coloring isn't helping, you know, cut this character out of the background here, making it a little muddy. The battle ensues. And at this point, Spawn grabs his buddy, who's one of the bums from the alleyway, right? And this is kind of the visual representation. This has been used a lot in Spawn, to Spawn teleporting. This is also a very clever way here to make a quick page when you're on a strict deadline. You know, as an artist, something like this, a lot of negative space, whether white or black, means a fairly quicker page, especially with a big headshot down here. This page was done pretty quickly. Not that Greg Capullo is not a professional. He does work very fast, I think, from what I can tell, or pretty fast. But this is definitely, when you hit a page like this, you're happy to get through quickly and be able to move on to the next one. Even this is great composition, great negative space, right? So you don't have to, you know, draw a panel around this image. You can use the black space all over here. And if I'm not mistaken, this is a stat of page 1 where, you know, Spawn's been taken out. They've added that detail of the building being destroyed and this little drawing of God floating out. And that means you don't have to draw the rest of that scene again. Let's just, I mean, yeah. That's like bang on, which is fine. It's a good trick. Doesn't ruin the story in any way, right? That's actually it for that issue. That's how it ends. We will just quickly go through this because this is a prelude and nocturnes to Blood Feud, which is a miniseries where, if I'm not mistaken, Spawn meets a vampire of some sort, possibly Dracula. So, not Greg Capullo. I believe the art on this is Tony Daniels. Really, yeah, art by Tony Daniel and Kevin Conrad. And I'm not quite sure what the deal is here, but we do have that character who is going to end up being the Dracula character or the vampire character in Blood Feud, just ripping this villain to shreds. Not quite sure where that was going. Tony Daniels was trying really hard, but I just never felt like his art, at this point at least, was comparing to what Capullo was putting out. But good on him for effort. Still, I gotta say today, it's a pretty good illustration. It's a lot of work in there. So there you have it. Spawn 32, what got me back into Spawn at that time. Greg Capullo's artwork, the final kind of meshing of McFarlane over Capullo seemed to really start working for me around this issue 32. Hope you enjoyed this review. Like and subscribe if you're so inclined, and I hope you guys all have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at kingcomics.ca, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.